It's time for Declare Your Independence with Ernest Hancock.
Believe me when I say we have a difficult time ahead of us. But if we are to be prepared for it, we must first shed our fear of it. I stand here without fear because I remember that I am here not because of the path that lies before me, but because of the path that lies behind me. I remember that for 100 years we have fought these machines. And after a century of war, I remember that which matters most. We are still here! Tonight, let us make them remember we are not afraid! No fear here on Declare Your Independence with me, Ernest Hancock, here in Phoenix, Arizona, IA, from the beautiful studios of Freedoms with an S, freedomsphoenix.com. Yet, in next week, we got the fourth edition of The E-Zine, a digital magazine. Freedom's Phoenix is going to be very, 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 very nice. It's about raising Generation Next. I spent 2.5 days at Butler and Jane Schaefer's home, interviewing them for 6 hours of video and making sure we get, because the whole focus is raising Generation Next. So his daughters, the whole family's participating in what happens when you got a freedom-oriented individual that, seeing it from the inside and has an opinion. Well, let me tell you how that segues into what we're going to be doing today. In the second hour, we're going to be talking about Agenda 21. We have a guest that wrote an article for the E-Zine, and her name is Rosa Koire. I'm going to find out how to pronounce that. Koire, I believe. And we get a lot of, there's a lot of news coming out about this now. We got Mikhail Gorbachev all of a sudden coming out saying we need regime change in Russia. KGB, Mr. Putin's not doing it. Right after we get done with Libya, this week, and we'll go to Syria next week, and then we're going to have a third world war with Russia. Seriously? Is that what we got to look forward to? I mean, dang. So we're going to find out what's going on, what Mikhail Gorbachev had to do with all this in with the West, and now Gory, and we're going to have environmental and raise the children to love the earth, and we're all going to be one. Happy, family, taxed, but, it's all collectively taxed. So we'll talk about that in the second hour. But the one thing that I wanted to make sure that we understood, how I'm going to segue into this first hour, is that Butler Schaefer, during the 1964 GOP nomination of Goldwater, that night, he was a paid executive director for the state of Nebraska, got his law degree, comes out of school. First thing he does, goes back to Nebraska, old farm boy, and he gets in there. Hey, Goldwater's nominated. Yay, we got our guy in. John Galt's going to run the country. What's he going to cut? Oh, you dumb, naive little boy. Didn't you know? We can just slow the growth of government. We're not going to be able to cut anything. And he becomes an anarchist. All of a sudden, he's buds with Karl Hess. So now we fast forward, gazillion years later, we have that generation. He's grown up, he's raised, starts having grandkids. I do the same. There's a realization going on here. But inside the campaign of Dr. Ron Paul, there is a battle going on. You self-hating libertarians. Here you have the greatest opportunity of someone that fills the bill way better than Goldwater, okay? A lot better pedigree, a lot better understanding of Austrian economics. Here's somebody that knew back in the day what was going to happen. Well, here it is. It's amazing it took this long. So now we need to discuss how is it we're going to support this effort. What should we be doing? What should we not be doing? How is this going to affect the rest of our lives at such a crucial moment in our history? Yesterday, we had Karen Kwiatkowski on. She's running for Congress. That kind of surprised me right there. Now, I know Karen. She spoke at the Freedom Summit. She writes for Freedom's Phoenix in her magazine, and she's like, yep, I'm going to be running for Congress, supporting Dr. Ron Paul's message, and I'm going to, take it to the peoples, and we're going to go do some butt whipping and do what we got to do inside and get done. Okay? Anybody that doesn't say Ron can win, she's like, well, she's got, tag teaming with Walter Block. Walter Block's an economist, Austrian School of Economics, and an anarcho-libertarian philosopher, but he's not anarcho enough that he's not advocating voting for Dr. Ron Paul. So I got you there, Walter?
Well, yes, I'm an anarcho-capitalist, and I certainly favor voting for Ron Paul.
Okay, so first off, we got to reconcile that right there. So there is your support for, which is very open. You know, it's not like a secret for Dr. Ron Paul. You're out there supporting Dr. Paul and voting for him and getting him on and keeping him up on the stage and, you know, supporting this effort because you see it as what? I mean, where are we at in America? We need to do this.
Well, we're in trouble in America. We don't have much of a free society. We have a nanny state. We have an imperialist country that is bombing innocent people to smithereens all over the world. And we have a drug policy. We have an economic problem with the Fed and the business cycle. We've got a lot of problems. And Ron Paul is an excellent libertarian, and he is creating libertarians by the bushel-full. There are many, many libertarians now who wouldn't have been but for the efforts of Ron Paul. And I think it's magnificent. And I don't see any inconsistency between favoring full freedom, namely stateless society, and on the one hand, and on the other hand, running for elective office or voting for Ron Paul or any of that. I don't see any inconsistency. People see an inconsistency because somehow you're giving sanction to the state if you vote, or if you support Ron Paul, you're sanctioning the government. But the government is, you know, it's sort of like a fish is unaware of the water. We're unaware of just how much government we've got. The people who think there's an inconsistency, do they use public roads? You're darn tootin'. Do they use U.S. fiat currency? Oh, yes. Do they go to public school? Many of them do. Some of them teach in public schools.
Now, I've heard this argument before, Walter, but they never advocate for it. You know,
never advocate for what?
For public roads. I mean, they're going to say, "Yep, we got to have government for public roads." I mean, they don't do that. I mean, you know, I can understand they're using it.
They use government roads. They use libraries. They use the post office. They use all sorts of things. So why not use the political system?
You know, I'm probably a dichotomy in a lot of ways, but I haven't voted since '02, but that hadn't stopped me from running. In '04, I run for U.S. Senate against McCain as a Libertarian candidate. In
Congratulations.
'06, I run for office, Secretary of State here for the second time. I run, you know, in '08. I ran, you know, so I'm not, it's not foreign to me, the concept that you're talking about. But of course, in that, I was very clear about how jacked up I thought the system was. And I'm sure Dr. Paul, he's just nicer about it. So
yeah, but he's equally critical of the evils of the government.
Well, that's what I want to get into, because just this weekend I saw a piece put together by someone called Ron Paul the Voluntarist or the Anarchist or whatever, and we put it up, and I watched it, and I'm going, yeah, you know, I mean, there's a lot to be, you know, in the '08 campaign and even the '88 campaign, and throughout his life, he says, you know, he was very clear, taxation is theft, and that we have the Constitution as a representation of the promise of government. They're just not keeping the promise. And that I would, you know, very much not to see coercion in government. So, I mean, there's a lot of evidence that he is of this path of a minarchist, well, not even a minarchist, more a voluntarist or even an anarchist, but he's using the process to spread the message. And I, of all people, I would like to put my, you know, self on the list that big, giant supporter of Dr. Paul getting up as big a soapbox as possible, as often as possible, to make absolutely sure that that message gets out, and whatever help I can give to make sure he does that, I'm your boy. But the thing is that when you, and when we come back in the next segment, we're going to hit break here in a little bit, I want to delve into this. The other side, there are some people, they are so adamant against the state that they see that what Dr. Paul is doing is creating some kind of a justification for its existence. And that is the argument. We're going to talk about that, talk about Reason Magazine, what they've been saying, and criticism of that. Stephen Molyneux from Toronto. Man, that guy's got all kind of venom for anybody doing anything politics, even though he admits how many libertarians are created. because of the Ron Paul Revolution. These are the things we're going to be talking about with economist Walter Block when we come back on Declare Your Independence in just a little bit.